When you go out of your doors, what do you see? It's amazing at the things we do that kind of represents what we see. Here's what I want, ladies and gentlemen. I know you everybody got what they want. And what I want, you might not want. But I'm going to tell you, for 73 years, I have seen some sickness. I have seen human beings who thought they were on top of this. They were able to create computers and telephones and electricity and burning stoves and cars and airplanes and jets and ships and bombs. They were able to create, it seems, almost any and everything. They were some of the most vile, some of the most weird people. I say weird because the only thing I can really think is very negative, and I don't want to say it. And why do I say that? Because they have such great potential. They did what they came here to do, and then they robbed the people. They robbed the people because they didn't know any better. They didn't know any better because the people who were here didn't know any better. Every time I talk to you, I want to talk to you as one of the people who love more than anybody. But because for me feeling like perhaps I do love everybody in one way or another, it also makes me present myself sometimes as I'm one of the most negative, always putting stuff down. And the reason I do that is because we the people, we go through little bits of skinning and grinning here and there, acting like everything is cool here and there, but we living in hell. We could be living beautifully every day, but we don't even know it and we don't want to know it. Listen here. I remember I used to be in the pulpit. I used to preach the gospel out of the King James book, you know? And back in those days, I was much younger and I could talk. I didn't forget stuff so fast. People used to come to me all the time. You know what they would ask me to pray for them for? Money. They needed money for what? Housing, for food, for clothing, for education, for health care, for transportation. They needed money for everything. Ask God. I'm fasting. Ask God. And me, I know God is real. I'm not worried about what the books say, or somebody that might have been talking, or some positive speaker. No, I have a relationship with God. And so when you ask me, what do? I go to God and I ask God. And I tell God what you have asked me to tell God. And you know what God tells me? To go back and tell you. Why are you asking God to work a miracle for you? Because that's what you're asking for. You're asking God, everybody in this who praying, you're asking God, God work a miracle for me. God work a miracle for me. So God be wondering all over the world, making miracles, making miracles. Well, the message that I got was, why would you ask God to make a miracle, the Spirit says, when the power to do it is in your own hands? And if you won't do it, why are you asking God? You ask God when God has given you everything that you need right now. Food, clothing, shelter, education, healthcare, everything you asking God for, you already got. And who did it? You did it. Now, there are those of you who don't have jobs. You didn't participate in it because they kept you out of it. They didn't want you in it. But that's the way it's done, my friends. You don't ask God for a miracle when you can do it yourself. So I tell you, if you're going to ask God for a miracle, then you make a change in your own life. You recognize the hell that you're living in and decide that you want a better life. And you start living for that better life. You do what you can. And when you've done all you can, then if a miracle is required, then God will work that miracle. But in the meantime, you do what you want to do, asking God for food. When God has given and prepared that anything that is required to produce food is here. And that's what you're doing, but you're not producing enough. Why? Because you're dealing with business. You're dealing with making money. You're not dealing with feeding people. When you start talking about housing, the same thing. People have no homes. People living in hutches. People living under tents. People living somewhere like hogs and pigs because they got nothing. And why don't they have anything? Because the human race acts like hogs and pigs. They don't care about one another. And why don't they care about one another? They had nobody to teach them to care. Why? Because they are after money. Who told you to go out there and just look after people because it's a family? You got to prepare that everybody's needs can be met. No, they told you to go get some money. And I remember once I was reading someplace when they started talking about the dollar bill or when they started bringing that kind of money into the scene, they were talking about loans, debt. They tell me every dollar that exists is represent a debt. And just for understanding, the first $1,000, somebody wanted to borrow $1,000. So they printed out $1,000 and gave it to that person at an interest rate of 25%. You pay back this $1,000 plus 25%. But there was no more money made, only $1,000. So when you paid back that $1,000, you were still indebted 25%. But there was no money. So how could you pay that debt? You either had to go into debt again to pay that, or somebody else is in the debt and paid you for something that you got that money to pay off your debt, but then they're in debt, paying off. So I'm asking you, I mean, how obvious can it get? For you to go over there and give somebody $1,000 and they say, okay, give me 1,000 plus 20% back when there is no 20%. They say, well, why did you agree with it? Because I needed food and clothing and shelter. You were ripped off from the beginning. So my message to you, ladies and gentlemen, is God is trying to tell you something. You just won't listen. God is trying to tell you that forgive me for saying he. I know God as a power. I know God as a spirit. I end up saying he because that's all I ever heard all my life. But when the miracles came, there was no he, there was no she. There was power that I saw the evidence of. So forgive me. I don't want you to think that I'm saying God is a man. I know that man made God. I even know how he looked. They put him put a picture in the book to say how he looked. Somebody might say, well, if he didn't want to say how he looked, why'd the picture in the book? And human beings got to stop being, somebody should tell you that all of us have been deceived. And all of us have got our little different thoughts. And they are just nothing but deception. In America, Republicans, Democrats, both of them, not one of them is worth 12 cents. They just represent a lie from the same vendor. A lie from the same vendor. But it's telling Republicans one thing, Democrats another, to keep them divided. And over time, they end up hating each other. Over time, they become bigots. Over time, they become racist. Over time, they become haters and want to go to war. And that's nothing but the devil. And I'm going to ask you something right now, ladies and gentlemen. What politician, Republican or Democrat or any other, is telling you that we got a plan we want to implement that will allow every American citizen to have a job that they can feel wonderful about? Is a politician telling you that? And why don't you demand? You must be out of your mind. Is a politician telling you that they're going to make sure that every American got somewhere to live, a home that they can be proud of, fixed like they want to, done like they want it to be done? Is a politician promising you that? Every American. If he's not, why don't you demand it? Is a politician telling you that you don't have to worry about education in America because education does something to a person? It makes a person be better at whatever it is they've been given to do. And is a politician guaranteeing that everything that they do, they will make sure that you have that access to education, unlimited and unrestricted? Is any politician telling you that? And why aren't they? And why aren't you demanding it? I'm asking you, are you concerned about living in peace, being prosperous and free? Are you? Are these politicians saying that they're not going to be taking you into a war? They're going to be coming, making out friendships with others? No, they're not. And why? Aren't you demanding it? But you want somebody to pray to God and tell God to work a miracle for you. Sit on your ass. And let guys tell you they're going to take away your right. They're going to tell you whether you can have a baby or not, or what you got to do to go through it. They're not going to feed your kids. They're not going to educate your kids. They're not going to do nothing but boss you. Then you hear what Trump said? Everything should be destroyed. He should be sitting on the throne. And everybody that does not love him, I'm not talking about love the government, if they don't love him, should be killed. I don't know if he said those words, but that's the impression that he gives. And we, America, sitting up every day, all night, talking about this stuff, talking about this junk. And how many of you talk about peace and prosperity and freedom and joy for every American and every citizen? How many of you talk about freedom for everybody? How many of you talk about it? Damn it, you don't even want to hear nobody talk about it. If somebody says something about it, you think they're crazy. Somebody say, what is it going to take for America to wake up? I tell you what it's going to take. It's going to take a small nation who loves God a lot more than you do. And you're going to mess with them. They're going to beat the hell out of you, America. And the American citizens, when you got to suffer like other people across the globe who have gone through all kinds of persecution, when you got to get down and eat slop when you don't want to, then you'll wake up. But who are you going to ask to call on God for you, to work a miracle for you? If the answer's still the same, you got to do it yourself. I'm going to stop right now. Thank you for bearing with me.